What if I told you that one of the most powerful kings in Europe met an end so horrifying that people refused to believe it for centuries? Not on a battlefield, not by assassination, not by poison. According to one of the darkest stories in medieval history, he was trapped inside a tower while thousands of rats crawled toward him from every direction. And they were hungry. This was Adolf of Nassau, a king who ruled the Holy Roman Empire during an age of endless wars, political betrayals, and ruthless ambition. To his enemies, he was a usurper. To his supporters, he was a legitimate ruler fighting for survival. But no matter which side people supported, everyone remembered the same terrifying story about his death. The story of the king who was eaten alive by rats. In the late 13th century, Europe was a brutal place. Kings rose to power through violence. Nobles switched loyalties overnight. Entire cities could be burned because of a single political disagreement. And Adolf understood this world perfectly. He had climbed from a relatively modest noble family to the highest position in the empire. Through alliances, military victories, and careful political maneuvering, he became King of the Romans, the title given to the future Holy Roman Emperor. But power has a way of creating enemies. And Adolf had plenty of them. Many princes believed he was becoming too powerful. They feared his growing influence and suspected that he wanted to dominate the empire instead of serving it. Soon whispers filled castles and royal courts. Then the whispers became plots. And the plots became open rebellion. The king who once commanded armies suddenly found himself surrounded by rivals eager to destroy him. But what happened next transformed a political conflict into one of history's most disturbing legends. According to medieval accounts, Adolf sought refuge in a fortified tower during a period of intense conflict. The structure stood above a river, isolated and seemingly secure. Its thick stone walls had survived wars. Its gates had resisted sieges. Its defenders believed nothing could get inside. They were wrong. As floodwaters rose around the tower, something else came with them. Rats. At first there were only a few, scurrying along the walls, climbing over floating debris, searching for dry ground. No one paid much attention. After all, medieval Europe was filled with rats. They lived in cities, villages, ships, castles, and monasteries. People saw them every day. But then more arrived. And more. And more. Within hours, hundreds covered the lower levels of the tower. Then thousands. The river seemed alive. A moving carpet of wet fur and twitching tails surged toward the structure from every direction. The defenders tried driving them away. They threw stones. They used sticks. They poured boiling water. Nothing worked. The rats kept coming, driven by hunger, panic, and instinct. Soon the tower echoed with scratching sounds. The walls seemed to move. The floors writhed beneath people's feet. Every dark corner became a nest of glowing eyes. Panic spread through the defenders. Food supplies dwindled. Sleep became impossible. Every time someone closed their eyes, they heard scratching. Closer, louder, relentless. And then the attacks began. The starving animals chewed through bags of grain. They devoured stored meat. They contaminated water supplies. Desperation filled the tower. The king's guards, who had once faced armored knights without fear, now recoiled at the sight of swarming rodents. Because unlike human enemies, these creatures never negotiated. They never retreated. They never stopped. Night after night, the scratching grew louder. Night after night, the numbers increased. And, according to the legend, the rats eventually reached the king himself. The details become darker with every retelling. Some accounts claim the starving animals attacked anyone too weak to defend themselves. Others describe defenders climbing onto furniture, desperately trying to escape the sea of teeth below them. Medieval storytellers painted a horrifying picture. A trapped ruler, a sealed tower, and an endless swarm closing in from every side. Whether every detail was true hardly mattered. The image burned itself into Europe's imagination, because it represented something deeper than a king's death. It represented justice. Or, at least the kind of justice people wanted to believe in. For centuries, rulers had seemed untouchable. They lived in castles. They commanded armies. They ordered executions with a single word. But this story suggested something different. It suggested that even kings could not escape fate. Even kings could be helpless. Even kings could be reduced to frightened human beings. And perhaps that is why the legend survived for so long. Not because people were fascinated by rats, but because they were fascinated by power, by the idea that no throne is permanent, no fortress is invincible, and no ruler, no matter how mighty, can remain above the forces that eventually come for us all. The king who once commanded an empire had spent his life fighting armies, negotiating alliances, and defeating rivals. Yet history remembered him for something far stranger: a dark tower, a rising flood, and countless hungry rats emerging from the shadows. Whether legend or reality, it became one of the most unforgettable endings ever attached to a king. And centuries later, people are still asking the same question. Could something this horrifying really have happened?